Hello and welcome viewers, I'm Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines. A Ukrainian drone attack has hit a tanker and an oil terminal in Russia's Black Sea port of Tuapse. Authorities have warned that the strike could disrupt exports of crude oil and refined products. The Kremlin has stated that a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his US counterpart Donald Trump is possible but is not needed now. Russia has emphasized that work on a Ukrainian settlement is needed instead. In a setback to the US brokered ceasefire, Israel maintains that the remains of 3 people Hamas handed over to the Red Cross in Gaza do not belong to any of the hostages. Hamas has denied US accusations that it looted aid in Gaza, calling the claims false and unfounded. The terror group has described the allegations as part of a deliberate disinformation campaign aimed at undermining its credibility. US President Donald Trump is set to host his Syrian counterpart Ahmed al-Shara at the White House on the 10th of November tentatively. This will be the first ever visit by a Syrian head of state to Washington after decades of international isolation. US President Donald Trump has hailed his meeting with China's President Xi Jinping in Busan as a major success. He has stressed that it brings everlasting peace along with key trade and tariff agreements. A deadly fire has engulfed a discount store in Hermosillo in northwestern Mexico, killing at least 23 and injuring a dozen, including children. The governor of the state of Sonora, Alfonso Durazo, has ordered a full investigation into the tragic place. Mass stabbing on a London-bound train in Cambridgeshire has left 9 with life-threatening injuries and 10 hospitalised. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the attack appalling and has urged the public to follow the advice of police officials. Well, viewers, those are the headlines in our top focus. The Kremlin has come out and stated that there is currently no need for an urgent meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has stated that while such a meeting is hypothetically possible, it is not required at the moment. Peskov has also added that what's needed right now is painstaking work on the Ukrainian settlement, signaling that Moscow remains focused on diplomatic processes rather than high-level summits. The comments, of course, come amid ongoing efforts to restart talks aimed at de-escalating the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Glenn Grant, former advisor to the Ukrainian Defense Minister. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Fresh statement coming in from Kremlin. How do you read into this?
Well, it's typical nonsense on the Kremlin side, but there never was going to be a meeting. I think people read too much into the press things and believe them. There never was going to be a meeting. This meeting was put forward by Trump, and it's part of his attempts to move the agenda away from the Epstein files, yes, which he is suffering badly from in America. So the Russians were never involved in wanting a meeting anyway. So it always was something from Trump. And now the Russians are trying to use it to actually put the blame onto Ukraine. And we're going to see a lot more of this because Russia is having a difficult time at the moment in all sorts of areas. So they will do anything they can at the moment to shift the emphasis of the press and media things onto Ukraine. So watch more for this.
Indeed. And, critics are arguing that this is one of Russia's strategies to merely stall at the moment, even as it is intensifying attacks on the front lines, intensifying attacks on Ukrainians' power grids, energy grids as well, which has left thousands without electricity, especially with now a winter coming in as well. And another concern that critics have had is the fact that any such high-level summit would not include the presence of the Ukrainians, of President Zelensky on the negotiating table.
Yeah, I mean, there are two or three things in that. I mean, to take the last one, I mean, the Russians still see that this is a Trump-led or a NATO-led war, or at least this is what they want people to think they think. Um, and that they don't want to deal with Zelensky because they know that when it gets face to face with Zelensky, they're going to lose the arguments. Um, and I mean the sort of the point that they're stalling. Well, they're not stalling. They're saying straightforward that they're not going to engage in talks until the fundamental matter of Ukraine is fixed, and their view of what this fundamental matter is that Ukraine should submit to Russia completely, and that isn't going to happen. So it's not a case of stalling, it's a case of just trying to find different ways of saying the same message, which is we're keeping going and we're going to keep going until we win.
Indeed, as you pointed out, what the Russian spokesperson is basically hinted at is the fact that Russia expects territorial concessions from Ukraine. Meanwhile, we did see these talks collapse after a memo was sent from Moscow to Washington. There's a lot of talks that this is the main contentious point over which these talks that were supposed to take place in Budapest collapsed over. Ukraine, of course, has been calling for a ceasefire first. It seems that the Trump administration has backed this as well. In the meantime, there's another statement that has come in from the Kremlin, and their spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, has come out and stated that the EU is complicit in international terrorism as it continues to sponsor Kiev. She's added that the European Commission may postpone its decision on what she claims is expropriating Russia's assets. She's, of course, pointing to the frozen assets that the EU plans to use to fund Ukraine's defenses. What do you make of this rhetoric?
Well, rhetoric from Russia is usually lies and nonsense, and this is. I'm sorry, but this is another one of the same thing. I mean, to blame the EU for something that Russia itself is doing is rich indeed. Irony of the highest order, and this is typical of the Russian actions and writings at the moment. I mean, the memo that you mentioned, nothing was stalled about Budapest. Budapest was never going to happen. You have to really understand, people must understand this. Budapest was just another action for people to distract from the realities of what is actually going on the ground and what is actually going on in America. So that memo was nothing. It was a nothing burger, as the Americans would say. It was just there to add to the fun of the messing up of people's minds, to try and make people believe things that are not actually real. There was never going to be a Budapest meeting. EU is only doing what it can to help Ukraine survive and the EU survive. What comes out of Russia is to muddy the waters. So don't get confused with these things, people, please.
All right, so requesting you to stay on with us. We're tracking some other crucial updates as far as the war is concerned. We're now learning that in Ukraine, nearly 60,000 people have lost electricity after a wave of Russian strikes overnight hit the frontline region of Zaporizhzhia. Now, according to regional officials, 2 people were injured, and the department is now working to restore power once conditions are safe. Photos, in fact, are posted online, show buildings reduced to rubble with windows and facades completely blown out. The southern region of Odesa has also come under drone attacks, leaving 2 people dead. Meanwhile, in Dnipropetrovsk, authorities have stated that the death toll from a separate airstrike that hit a shop has risen to 4. Now, as winter is nearing, Russia is stepping up its missile and drone strikes on Ukraine's power grid, of course triggering outages and forcing Kiev's emergency crews to race to repair damage and manage rolling blackouts. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Glenn Grant. We're seeing this consistent strategy by the Russians to target Ukrainian energy grids, leaving civilians without power as well. Winter is, of course, just round the corner. What are Ukraine's priorities at this time?
Well, I think you need to shift the idea of Ukraine's priorities. That's the government idea to the people's priorities. Most people are trying to find generators. This is going to be the third, fourth winter, effectively, now that this has happened. So it's not a new thing. People are they're not immune to the cold, of course not, but they are expecting this to happen. They are expecting to go without power. There is a lot of unhappiness by society about the fact that the government has not spread the power generation out more than it has done. So we're still based upon, large old Soviet type power bases in many places, which means that one hit and as you say, 60,000 people immediately are short of power. And this is going to continue because there are still quite a few extremely vulnerable power generation places that around in Ukraine. The government is saying it's doing a lot about this, but I think the general feeling is that they do not have this as a high enough priority, and that they are not doing enough. We wait and see. Kiev certainly is the people in Kiev are deeply unhappy that the Kievan government hasn't actually really for another year sorted out how it's actually going to manage power for the citizens.
Indeed, and speaking of government action as well, we've recently seen a strike hit Tuapse, an oil refinery there belonging to Rosneft. How successful has the Ukrainian strategy been in straining fuel supplies, disrupting military logistics and raising wartime costs for Russia?
It's very hard to actually put a figure on something. I mean, the general feeling is that about a quarter of the Russian energy system has actually been affected. I'm not going to say destroyed, but affected. But Ukraine continues to work on this. I mean, as you saw, this is just one tanker. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of tankers, and that Ukraine hasn't done anything to the tankers. It's been hoping that the European Union and America and individual countries would sanction them and actually put the tankers out. Because if they can do that, then Russia can't actually export the oil because it doesn't have enough sufficient pipelines now for places. I think you will see Ukraine continue hard to work at damaging as much of the oil storage as possible, and also deep strikes to actually to hit the areas that are producing oil. But I'm not sure it's going to have that much effect still.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time and sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. Viewers, we're tracking some other developments as far as this war is concerned. We're now learning that Russia has stated that its air defense forces have shot down 7 unmanned aerial vehicles over the Oryol region. Governor Andrei Lichkov has confirmed the attack on his Telegram channel, stating that the drones were destroyed overnight. He's added that fragments from the downed UAVs damaged windows in several buildings of the city of Oryol, as well as private cars and other areas as well. Authorities have reported no casualties. However, the governor has described the incident as another attempted strike on the region. Russia, of course, while continuing its attacks on Ukraine, also faces repeated drone attacks deep inside its territory as well. Well, viewers, shifting focus away from Europe towards what's taking place in the Middle East. Hamas has now denied U.S. accusations that its fighters looted an aid convoy in Gaza, calling the claims false and part of a systematic disinformation campaign. The statement from the Hamas-run Gaza media office came after U.S. Central Command released drone footage purporting to show suspected Hamas operatives looting a humanitarian truck in southern Gaza on Friday. U.S. CENTCOM has stated that the video was captured by an American MQ-9 drone monitoring the ceasefire, and that the incident was reported by the U.S.-led Civil Military Coordination Center in Kiryat Gat in Israel. The center, staffed by about 200 American troops and allied forces, oversees humanitarian and security aid flows into Gaza as part of the post-war stabilization effort. Let's in fact keep that drone footage on our screens as we address it. If you can have that back, yes, right there you can see this is the footage released by the CENTCOM. You can clearly see on the left side there is a truck full of aid and people surrounding it as well, and on the right with an empty street, it seems that the aid truck has been torn down as well. The supplies have been torn down as well. With us on the broadcast is Gedalia Bloom, Middle East Affairs expert, joining us from Eli in Israel. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Israel has time and again warned the international community that Hamas has been misappropriating aid, international aid that is sent for Palestinians on the ground in Gaza, and it seems now US CENTCOM has come out and released this particular footage as well, supporting these claims. Hamas has predictably come out and called these claims false and a systematic disinformation campaign. But on the ground itself, what's really needed to be done?
What's really needed to be done is for the world to understand that just because the source of intel comes from Israel in the last 2 years, it doesn't make it false. As much as people want to hear that Israel is the aggressor, we're running a propaganda machine. The fact of the matter is that I was a little skeptical in having the U.S. Build a base in southern Israel in order to be a watchdog, not only to Hamas but also to Israel. But now we're seeing, the benefits of it is that now we're seeing a third party, an external party coming using their own drones, their own intelligence, and exposing what Israel's been saying for a number of years. And at the end of the day, the answer is what Trump's 20-point plan is, which actually doesn't include Hamas as a ruling power in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, and a lot is being said about the international peace coalition that is also operating. US has made it very clear that it expects its Arab allies, including the UAE, including Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, also to be involved on the ground. We've recently seen an IDF statement as well objecting to the presence of Turkish troops in particular. I wanted to understand from you, what are Israel's concerns with Turkey and Erdogan specifically?
I mean, I'll tell you what, anybody who wants to go on X right now and go look at Erdogan's chief advisor, he had just posted a couple hours ago an image, a cartoon image of the devil with Jewish stars on it, calling out for Israel to be uprooted. And how long is it going to take for us for Turkey to destroy, or how long is it going to take for Israel to be destroyed? And so these are the people that we're not going to rely on. This is a Trojan horse. Turkey, part of NATO, seems to be part of the Western world, but instead they are a Trojan horse. Erdogan has called repeatedly for the takeover and the occupation of Jerusalem. He has aspirations for the Ottoman Empire to come back. And this would be a step in that positive direction for them to have any foothold in Gaza at all. And this is completely unacceptable for Israel. And also, I'll tell you what, when it comes to the international quote-unquote peacekeeping force, we've seen these before. We've seen these international peacekeeping forces following the withdrawal of IDF troops of southern Lebanon back after the first Lebanon war. And once the peacekeepers came in, they sat back and watched Hezbollah build up their stronghold. So we have no faith in any international force, even the United States, because we don't want to see U.S. soldiers having to face an armed Hamas that doesn't want to disarm. We do not want U.S. soldiers. We don't want our allies. We don't even want our enemies to have to face Hamas, because we know that they are not going to be successful because they don't have anything to lose. Israel is willing to face Hamas. IDF soldiers are willing to go in and sacrifice their own lives in order to disarm Hamas, because our country, our family, our children are all reliant. Their safety, their future is all reliant on a disarmed and peaceful region in the Gaza Strip.
All right, so requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other updates from the Middle East. Now, despite US President Donald Trump's optimism, the prospect of a normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia appears to be fading. Saudi commentator Ali Shihabi, a close aide to Riyadh's leadership, has stated that an agreement is virtually impossible before year end. He has added that only a miraculous change in Jerusalem could alter the situation. Now, as per reports, Saudi officials remain cautious, signaling that long-standing political and religious disputes continue to block progress. Analysts are stating that any breakthrough would require significant diplomatic shifts, and for now, hopes of a swift agreement between the two nations remain slim. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Gedalia Bloom. Interesting statement coming in from Saudi Arabia. We did see the landmark Abraham Accords being inked just about 4 to 5 years back, which brought about 4 Arab nations to formally recognize Israel. There are, of course, hopes by Donald Trump to augment the Abraham Accords. There are talks taking place with the Saudis with regards to that. But regardless of this, there's been a lot of back-channel diplomacy taking place between Israel and Saudi Arabia as well. Why do you think the Saudi regime is hesitant to formally recognize Israel? Is it a question of their legitimacy, their image in both domestically and the Arab world at large?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think that the core reason, and let's go back to 4 or 5 years, as you mentioned, before the Abraham Accords, Iran was a very strong threat to the Gulf states. The Western world was ignoring it. The Europeans were going and signing one deal after the other that the Iranians were breaking their nuclear program, and so nobody was standing up except for Israel. And I think that's what drove, number one, the Abraham Accords was, number one, it was security. If the Gulf states created an alliance with Israel and Iran was acting aggressively, then they could rely on Israel, and they were right. The economics and everything else came after it, in which they put in front as the face of the Abraham Accords was just that. It was a front. It was definitely beneficial. But I'll say this. Since the 12-day war in which Israel significantly weakened the Iranian regime, the leverage of the Gulf states, and especially Saudi Arabia, who was the number one enemy of Iran, it wasn't Israel, not America, first it's Saudi Arabia, they don't feel the leverage anymore vis-a-vis Iran, the Iranian threat to come to Israel. When they did, the Palestinian issue was not even a big issue. As you could go back into certain reports, Saudi officials would say, listen, we're ready to have agreements with Israel as long as they are discussing the idea of a Palestinian state. That was kind of like their most watered down messaging as far as creating a two-state solution. Now that we see the Iranian regime is a lot weaker, now they're in a much stronger position. They don't need to have they don't need to join the Abraham Accords in order for the security. So I think that's where it comes from. And I'll tell you, when it comes to Israel's interest, our interest lies much more in securing our people and our land and not creating a Palestinian state than having an alliance with Saudi Arabia, in which we don't trust anyway. Let's not forget, 9/11. Osama bin Laden came from the Saudi family, was funded by a Saudi prince, and so how things turn, even though they're becoming more moderate, we don't know where 20 years is going to be. So we're not willing to bet a friendship on an unstable partner with the security and the safety of our own country.
I wanted to digress a little bit over here and speak about Israel's neighborhood at large. There's recently been a statement that's come in from Tom Barak, U.S.'s special envoy for Syria. This has come amidst Washington's frustration with Beirut with regards to the lack of headway being made for the disarmament of Hezbollah. He's branded Lebanon a failed state. To what extent would you concur?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't envy the Lebanese government. The Lebanese government is the Lebanese people, the country, is one of the weakest in the Middle East. They are the first ones that really want to make peace with Israel, but they'll be the last because they can't lead, because they'll be under threat from their Arab brethren. So when it comes to the Lebanese, who the army doesn't have the firepower or the willpower to see the disarmament, the forced disarmament, because they're not doing it diplomatically. Hezbollah is not going to sign an agreement and hand over their weapons. They're between a rock and a hard place. They either sit back and let the status quo continue, or they walk into the prospect of a civil war. Now, the status quo for them is to watch Israel disarm Hezbollah. And we know that Israel is sending over intelligence to the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government to assist them in disarmament, even though they're not acting on it.
Yes.
I can only presume, and this, I have no evidence of this at all, but I can only presume that the Lebanese government and army has every interest to see Hezbollah disarmed. They can't do it. They see Israel's actively doing it. And so I can only presume that the Lebanese government and army is giving intelligence to the Israeli officials in which they're showing where the targeted, where the Hezbollah strongholds are. And so we could target them in nighttime raids, as we've been doing in the last few months.
Indeed, I also wanted to touch upon Syria. There's a landmark meeting that's going to be taking place between Donald Trump and al-Shara very, very soon. The tentative date is set for the 10th of November at the White House. This is going to be the first ever visit by a Syrian head of state to Washington after decades of international isolation. There have, of course, been murmurs of the Trump administration applying a lot of pressure on Syria in order to reach a security framework with Israel. I wanted to understand from you, what are your expectations from this particular meeting?
You know, I think that the way that President Donald Trump's style is to put the cart in front of the horse, because he believes that through his leverage and power, if he says something, he puts it in the world, it'll be more likely to happen. As like we saw with with bringing Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords, he was very optimistic, and I think that was more of a manifestation of it. When it comes to al-Jolani, the president of Syria, going to the United States, part of Tom Barak's goal is to have him as part of a committee to fight ISIS. Now, this reminds me back when my father used to work in computer securities, and he said to me, you know, big banks, big corporations, he said they never hired hackers, they never hired felony hackers, because even though they know the inside, they know how it works, they know how to get through. Putting them in a position will give them a different perspective because they know how the criminal thinks, but they can never be trusted. And so when it comes to al-Jolani, who started his career in Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda Iraq, which is very much in line and associated with ISIS, he's not to be trusted. And I think that for the Western world to bring him in, the only logical conclusion I could come with is that they're not being naive, or maybe they are. They're not being naive, but they're trying to leverage the Western world and everything that comes with it, all the benefits that come with it, for al-Jolani to bring Syria into the West and away from jihad. So time will tell. We'll see what happens. But again, I don't trust him like my father would never hire a hacker to do cybersecurity for a major bank. I would never hire al-Jolani to be the overseer of the fight against ISIS.
Indeed, and a lot of people have pointed out that the State Department tweet a couple of years back, declaring him a wanted terrorist, that's still up. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time and, of course, sharing your perspective on what's taking place in the Middle East. Meanwhile, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news coming in. We're now learning that a woman and a man have been placed under formal investigation over the $102 million Louvre Museum jewel heist, bringing the total number of people charged in the case to 4. The man, known to police for his previous thefts, was charged with organized theft and criminal conspiracy, while the woman was charged with complicity in organized theft and criminal conspiracy. 3 other people who had been arrested on the 29th of October, along with the man and this woman, were released without charge. The 2 new suspects were brought before investigating judges and remain in pre-trial detention, but both have denied any involvement in the heist. More news coming in at this time from Mexico. Now, as per reports, a tragic fire tore through a Waldo's discount store in Hermosillo in Mexico, killing at least 23 people and injuring 11 others. Sonora Governor Alfonso Durazo has stated that some victims are children. Authorities rushed the injured people to local hospitals while firefighters battled the blaze that swept through the store. Governor Durazo called the incident a profound moment of sadness for all Sonorenses and has ordered an exhaustive and transparent probe into determining the cause and assigning responsibility behind this incident. Rescue teams, meanwhile, continue to search the scene as families mourn the victims of this devastating disaster in northern Mexico. Listen in to what Governor Durazo had to say.
La explosión ocurrida en la tienda Waldos de la Colonia Centro en Hermosillo ha dejado una profunda tristeza en todas y todos los sonorenses. Hasta el momento se tiene el registro de 23 personas fallecidas, 11 lesionadas que están siendo atendidas en diferentes hospitales de la ciudad. Lamentablemente, entre las víctimas se encuentran menores de edad. He instruido a todas las dependencias del gobierno del Estado a brindar acompañamiento integral, atención médica, psicológica y social. Nadie enfrentará este dolor en soledad. Desde los
Viewers, that's all we have for this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.